This SL has ended up with a mishmash of different trim pieces. This end piece here is done in what Mercedes called Zebrano wood. The centre piece is also done in Zebrano. This Zebrano is very similar to teak, and what we're going to be doing is repairing and refurbishing all of this woodwork in teak and trying to match that. You can see this end piece here is damaged. Here the lacquer has come off, so we're going to very carefully take that lacquer off. We've actually gone along to Robin's Timber in Bristol and bought some teak veneer. Here it is. Costs about £34 a square metre, so it's not expensive at all. In fact, they actually gave me that piece there because it wasn't worth their while booking it out, but I did buy some other things as well. And we're just going to try re-veneering that. So first of all, we're going to take the old stuff off, stick a new piece of veneer on there, and then we're going to try lacquering it. We're going to try a variety of different methods to do that. We're going to try some spray-on lacquer from Toolstation. We're also going to try some paint-on lacquer, which they use for doing floors and bars, etc. This particular trim piece is the wrong trim piece for the car. It should be teak veneered, and somebody's put an immobilizer, etc. in there, but it should also have a vacuum adjust for the headlamp switch, which it doesn't. So I may just get a piece of wood cut there and veneer it and make up my own. I can just buy a second-hand one. They're about £120 on eBay. And this here, which is the gear stick central trim, you can see what happens over time. The lacquer begins to fade, and then eventually you get cracks in the lacquer, and then moisture gets underneath the cracks and it starts lifting up, which is what you've got here. So I think what we're going to do here is strip all of this veneer off. This is actually walnut burr, it should be teak. And then we're going to get a bigger piece of veneer, put it over there and try and glue it on. We're going to have to use a water-based glue for this because it's curved here, and you need to wet the veneer to curve it over and make a form piece. So we're going to have a go at doing that. But first of all, let's start off getting off the the lacquer from here and see how we go. It may be useful to know that you don't actually have to take the entire dashboard out to get these end bits of trim off. They're actually held in by two bolts, two 8mm bolts, and you can access those bolts with a socket either through the speaker hole or by taking out the glove box and coming in at the back. So I'm just quickly going to show you what the back of that looks like. So if you wanted to remove the piece of trim on the other side, you would basically be coming in, once again, to get this piece of trim out, you could just take the instrument panel out, or you could try coming in through this speaker socket, and you'd be accessing these two bolts here. Perfectly possible to do it through the speaker socket, probably easier to take the instrument panel out. But when you take those out, you would detach the heater ducts here, and you'd leave that intact. It's a much easier way to get the dashboard out by leaving that still attached to the wire here. The last thing I'd mention is, if you do intend to take the dashboard out for any reason, that it's quite a good idea to take these trims off before you do it, because they have a tendency, the lacquer has a tendency to catch on the A-pillar seals and just chip off and snap a bit of lacquer off the end. In some cases it might be just the lacquer you want to get off, in which case just a sharp chisel behind the lacquer and try and chip it off carefully without damaging the veneer behind. That lacquer came off really easy with a couple of sharp chisels, so if it was just the lacquer that was faded and the wood below wasn't damaged, you could just then mask this piece up and either get some spray on lacquer from Toolstation, it's about £5 a can, and just spray that over, or you could get some paint on lacquer, trying to avoid brush strokes and go through the process of sanding down to get a smooth finish with 1000 grit and then reapplying, etc. So we're just going to decide whether or not to actually get that veneer off and make another piece up. I'm committed now. I'm going to chisel off, Stanley knife blade off all of that veneer and see if I can carefully cut another piece exactly the same shape. A wheel which gets all the remnants of glue off but doesn't damage the chrome. We've got most of that old glue and veneer off. Now the veneer is actually stuck, I don't know if you can see that, to a thin aluminium strip, and you could, if so desired, try and get that thin aluminium strip off there, but my suspicion is the chance of doing it without bending it or damaging it was quite slim, so I'm actually going to see if I can stick the veneer on in situ. And the chance of getting it right on such a thin piece of veneer is very slim. I do have plenty of veneer to practice with, but I suspect that the way to do it is actually to take that aluminium plate off, it'd be glued onto that, take it off and then glue one whole strip of veneer on, and then once it's glued, then cut around the actual profile of the aluminium. So if this doesn't work, that's going to be our plan B. With a Stanley knife, that did actually work. It's almost, not quite, almost perfect. This bit of chrome here is actually a flat profile, so I think what I'm going to do is carefully apply some Evo Stick contact glue on here and on the other side of that, and then see if we can stick it on. I'm just going to use some Evo Stick multi-purpose impact adhesive. I'm going to very carefully paint it on there with a small paintbrush, trying not to get any on the chrome, and then I'm going to leave it for a while to get tacky. I'm going to paint Evo Stick on the other side and then put the two together. Just going to clamp that down. Okay, we've glued the teak veneer on here, but now we've got to try and cut this piece out. So I've made a template using this one, but to try and get those curves exactly right is going to prove extremely difficult, which is probably why when you're doing this you should really take the aluminium plate off and just use that as the template. Try and get this piece out without splintering the rest of the teak. It's obviously very thin around those edges, and part of this is actually glued down, and that glue is pretty strong. You've got to be so careful lifting this. Got to be so careful lifting this piece out that you don't just splinter everything else. Hopefully that's it. I managed not to break that piece of teak. Next up, we're just gonna lacquer that. All we need to do is put the plastic coating in a glass. It's 4:1 hardness, so we'll put 4 of those in, one of those, and then we'll paint it on with a little paintbrush and see how that looks. Comes out like. So what we do now is we go over with fine sandpaper. I was going to go over with some 1000 grit sandpaper actually, but a friend of mine who's here, who's a carpenter, said nope, go over with 400 grit. So that's what we're going to do before we apply the next coat. Smooth, which is what you want.
But when you apply the second coat of lacquer, the fact that it's matte now won't matter. It will then become it will become clear again.
And those imperfections around the edge, what would you do with them?
Well, some of it's just
glue,
just scratched off with your fingernail.
Hard wax.
You could use a hard wax in there.
Now just come off with lacquer, or
the inside of a car might get a bit hot, so you might not want to use that. But really, this is just glue stuck on here, so you might just need a bit of acetone or something to get that off.
Right.
But really, you just want it to feel smooth to the touch.
Gotcha. Now got a couple of coats of lacquer on it. I'm going to leave it for another 24 hours just to completely harden. Then I'm going to go 1000 grit sandpaper on it just to get it smooth, and then I'm going to buff it with the buffing compound that comes in that Rustin's kit, and I reckon for a first attempt that's going to look as good as new. Just incidentally, I did get a quote for that little piece of trim there, which was £55, which I can see why it's £55 because it's a time-consuming process. But there we go, we've saved ourselves £55. That's ready to go back on the car. And once we've got that done, we're probably ready to put the dashboard back in. 2 coats of lacquer on it, and we've just sanded it down with 1000 grit sandpaper, and where you see it should all be flat matte, and where you see that it's still darker is where there are sort of pits, etc. So we're going to try and sand this down smooth, and then we're going to buff it with the buffing compound. Come out too badly at all. And I was feeling quite pleased with myself until my darling wife pointed out that it's actually lighter than the other piece that's on the car. And that's because when you get a sheet of teak, it varies in shade, etc. And what I should have done is cut a darker piece of teak. So I've recut the template here, and I'm actually going to try seeing if that comes out any better. I'm going to use a different product. I'm going to use Plasticoat gloss spray on lacquer, because getting a smooth finish painting on lacquer is extremely difficult. So I'm just going to see how that comes out. I have actually cut out these little pieces here and also this other piece. The Zebrano wood on here is absolutely fine, but the problem I'm going to have is actually matching the colour. Whoops, sorry, that's lighter on there, as my darling wife rightly pointed out. And I think what I'll do is just redo all the veneer on these two pieces in teak, and then it'll just be slightly lighter. It'll all come from the same piece of teak and it'll just match 100%. The one thing I would say is I didn't have good results using this here. If I was going to do it, I am going to do it. This is a much better product. It's much more expensive, £18 plus VAT. It's a sort of 4-part. You get a lacquer, and then you get the hardener, you get a buffing compound, you get a brush cleaner. It's a lot more expensive, but it's really worth it. The bit I did with that came out really, really nice. And the bits I did a few test bits with this, just didn't come out that great. So my advice would be, if you are going to just touch up your trim or redo the whole trim, spend the extra money and get something like that and paint it on the lacquer rather than try and spray it on.